I woke up this morning and looked at my phone. 12 missed calls, all from my family. The same family that told me 3 years ago that no one wanted me there. I can still hear my brother's voice cold and sharp. I can still see my parents sitting in silence, nodding along like they agreed with every word. I did not argue. I just packed my bags and walked out. So, why after 3 years of silence are they suddenly desperate to reach me? Before I begin this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If stories about family betrayal and finding your own strength speak to you, hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now, let me take you back to where it all began so you can understand why those 12 missed calls mean more than just a phone ringing. My name is Xenia. I am the oldest of two brothers. My younger brother Marcus came into the world 4 years after me, and from the very beginning, things were different for him. We grew up in a small house in the suburbs of Ohio. My father worked as an electrician, spending long hours fixing wires and panels in other people's homes. My mother was a nurse pulling night shifts at the local hospital more times than I could count. Money was always tight, but we made it work. At least that is what I told myself. From a young age, I was taught that being the firstborn came with responsibility. I had to look out for Marcus. I had to set a good example. I had to help around the house without being asked. Marcus, on the other hand, was treated differently. He was the baby of the family. He got sick a lot as a child, always catching colds and fevers that kept my mother up at night worrying. So, naturally, he got more attention, more care, more patience. I understood that. I accepted it as normal. I never questioned it because I believed that was just how families worked. As I grew older, I poured everything into my education. I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and earned a partial scholarship to attend college. The scholarship did not cover everything, so I worked part-time jobs to pay for the rest. I never asked my parents for money. I figured they had enough to worry about with Marcus and the bills piling up at home. I graduated with a degree in accounting and landed a stable job at a financial consulting firm. It was not glamorous, but it paid well, and I was proud of what I had built on my own. The moment I started receiving a steady paycheck, I began sending money home every month. It felt like the right thing to do. My parents had raised me, sacrificed for me, and now it was my turn to give back. I helped them pay off credit card debt that had been hanging over their heads for years. When the roof started leaking during a heavy rainstorm, I sent extra money to cover the repairs. When Marcus enrolled in college, I bought him a brand new laptop so he could keep up with his classes. I never expected anything in return. I just wanted to help my family. But then something happened that made me pause for the first time. Marcus dropped out of college after 2 years. He said school was not for him, that he had not found his passion yet. I expected my parents to be disappointed, maybe even upset. Instead, they defended him without hesitation. They told me that not everyone was cut out for academics and that Marcus just needed more time to figure things out. When I gently suggested that maybe he should at least get a part-time job while he searched for direction, my mother cut me off. She said I should not compare Marcus to myself because we were different people. A few months later, I discovered something that left me speechless. I had been sending money home specifically to fix the heating system before winter arrived. 3 months of my salary went toward that goal. But when I called to ask how the repairs were going, my mother casually mentioned that they had used the money to buy Marcus a used car instead. She said he needed transportation to look for work and that I would understand. I did not understand. That money was meant to keep my parents warm during the cold months. Instead, it went to Marcus, who had not held a job in over a year. I wanted to say something. I wanted to express how hurt I felt, but I swallowed my words and stayed quiet. That night, lying alone in my apartment hundreds of miles away from home, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I wondered if the sacrifices I made were even noticed. I told myself I was overthinking. Family is family, after all. Everything would work out eventually. I had no idea that this was only the beginning. 2 years passed, and Marcus announced that he had finally found his calling. He wanted to open a sports bar. He painted a picture of a lively place where people could gather to watch games, drink beer, and have a good time. The problem was that Marcus had zero experience running a business. He had never managed employees, handled finances, or dealt with suppliers. He did not even have a proper business plan written down. Just big dreams and bigger confidence. My parents were thrilled. They believed in Marcus with their whole hearts. They told everyone in the family about his exciting new venture and how proud they were of him for taking this leap. To fund the sports bar, Marcus borrowed money from multiple sources. He took out loans, maxed out credit cards, and even convinced my parents to dip into their retirement savings. I found out about this last part only after the money was already gone. The sports bar opened with a small celebration. Marcus posted photos online smiling in front of the entrance like he had already made it. But the reality was harsh. Within 8 months, the bar was drowning in debt. Customers were not coming in the way Marcus had expected. The location was bad, the prices were wrong, and the competition from established bars nearby was brutal. By the end of the first year, Marcus had to shut the doors for good. He owed nearly $60,000 to various creditors. My parents panicked. They had invested their retirement money into this dream, and now it was gone. They turned to the only source of steady income they could rely on, me. Without directly asking, they began expecting the monthly money I sent to go toward paying off Marcus's debt. My contributions, which I had intended to help with groceries and utility bills, were now being funneled into a hole that Marcus had dug himself. Then came the phone call I will never forget. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice carrying that familiar mix of warmth and expectation. She told me that Marcus had a new idea. He wanted to open an auto repair shop this time. He had learned from his mistakes, she assured me. This time would be different. The only problem was the startup cost, $80,000. I felt my stomach drop. $80,000 was everything I had saved over 7 years. That money was supposed to be my down payment on a house, my ticket to building a future for myself. My mother did not seem to understand the weight of what she was asking. She simply said that I was his brother and that brothers help each other. I told her no. I explained that I could not hand over my entire savings for another business venture that had no guarantee of success. I told her that I loved Marcus, but that I had to protect my own future too. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke in a tone I had never heard before. She said I had changed and that the son she raised would never have turned his back on family. A few days later, my father called. His voice was cold and clipped, nothing like the man who used to ruffle my hair when I was a kid. He told me that if I could not help when the family needed me most, then maybe I should not bother calling home anymore. He hung up before I could respond. Despite everything, I continued sending money home every month. I did not want to abandon my parents completely, but something had shifted. My messages in the family group chat went unanswered. When I wished my mother a happy birthday and sent her a gift, she thanked me briefly and ended the call within 2 minutes. Marcus started posting vague comments on social media about people who only care about themselves and never support their own blood. My parents liked those posts. They even left comments agreeing with him. I began to realize that I was being pushed out, not with a single dramatic confrontation, but slowly, quietly, one ignored message at a time. That Thanksgiving, I decided to make one last effort. I drove 5 hours to spend the holiday with my family, hoping that being there in person would remind them of the bond we once shared. I brought a nice bottle of wine and a homemade dessert that had taken me hours to prepare. When I walked through the front door, no one greeted me. No one even looked up. Dinner was painful. My parents and Marcus talked among themselves as if I were invisible. When I tried to join the conversation, Marcus would interrupt me or change the subject entirely. My parents went along with it, never once acknowledging that I was being excluded. I sat at that table eating in silence, feeling like a ghost in my own childhood home. That night, I lay in my old bedroom and stared at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck up there as a kid were still faintly visible. I wondered what I had done wrong. I wondered if I had not given enough, not loved enough, not tried hard enough. I told myself that maybe if I just kept showing up, kept proving my loyalty, things would eventually get better. I did not know yet that some things cannot be fixed by trying harder alone. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I received a text message from my Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister. She told me that my grandmother was very sick and did not have much time left. I loved my grandmother deeply. She was the one person in the family who had always treated me fairly, who had never made me feel like I had to earn her love. I knew I had to see her before it was too late. I drove through the night to reach my parents' house where the family had gathered. When I walked through the door, I found everyone sitting in the living room. My father was in his usual chair by the window. My mother sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap. Marcus stood near the fireplace, arms crossed over his chest. Aunt Linda was there too, sitting quietly in the corner. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the tension in the air, thick and heavy like a storm about to break. Marcus was the first to speak. His face was red, his jaw tight with barely contained anger. He looked at me like I was an intruder, not his brother. He demanded to know why I had even bothered to show up. I told him I came to see Grandma, that I wanted to be there for her. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. He accused me of not caring about anyone, of only thinking about myself, of being selfish when the family needed me most. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to say something to defend me, to at least acknowledge that I had done nothing wrong. My father stared at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. My mother turned her face away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Neither of them said a word. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to something low and cold. He said the words slowly, making sure each one landed like a punch. "No one wants you here. Get out." I looked at my parents one last time, giving them a final chance to speak up. My father gave a small nod. My mother did the same. They agreed with Marcus. After 28 years of being their son, of sacrificing and giving and trying to be good enough, this was their answer. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not beg them to reconsider. I simply said, "Okay." Then I walked upstairs to my old room, gathered the few belongings I had left there from my childhood, and packed them into a small backpack. I came back downstairs, walked past my family without a word, and stepped out the front door. I did not look back. I drove into the night with no destination in mind. I just knew I could not stay there, not for another minute. The road stretched out ahead of me, dark and empty, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. The first few weeks after leaving were the hardest. I stayed with my college friend Kyle, who had a spare room and a kind heart. He did not ask too many questions. He just handed me a key and told me to stay as long as I needed. I stopped sending money home. For the first time in 7 years, I kept my entire paycheck for myself. The guilt was overwhelming at first, but eventually it faded into something else, relief maybe, or the beginning of self-respect. I used the money I had been sending to my parents to rent my own apartment. It was small and modest, but it was mine. I threw myself into my work, staying late at the office, taking on extra projects, proving my value to people who actually appreciated my efforts. Within a year, I was promoted to senior financial analyst. 2 years after leaving my family behind, I bought a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus. It was the first property I had ever owned, purchased entirely with my own money and my own hard work. I also started seeing a therapist. For the first time in my life, I talked openly about my childhood, my family, and the patterns I had fallen into. I learned that I was not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. I learned that setting boundaries was not selfish. It was necessary. I learned that my worth was not determined by how much I gave or how much I sacrificed. During this time, I met someone who changed everything. Her name was Priya, an immigration lawyer with a sharp mind and a warm laugh. She was the first person who made me believe that love could be healthy, that relationships did not have to be about constantly proving yourself worthy. She loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I also built a new circle of friends. Kyle remained a constant presence in my life. My coworker Amanda became a close confidant. My elderly neighbor Bernard invited me over for coffee every Sunday morning and told me stories about his own complicated family. These people were not connected to me by blood, but they chose to be in my life. That choice meant more to me than any obligation ever could. 3 years passed. 3 years of growth, healing, and building a life I could be proud of. And then this morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls from my family, the same family that had told me to leave and never come back. I did not call them immediately. Instead, I reached out to Aunt Linda to find out what was going on. She told me everything. Marcus had tried to start another business, this time a food delivery app. He had borrowed heavily again, convinced that this venture would finally be his big break. It failed spectacularly. He now owed over $200,000 to various lenders and investors. But that was not the worst part. My parents had co-signed on several of his loans. They had put up their house as collateral. Now the creditors were threatening to foreclose. My parents were about to lose the only home they had ever known. To make matters worse, Marcus had disappeared 2 weeks ago. No one could reach him. He had vanished, leaving our parents to deal with the mess he created. Aunt Linda told me that my parents were desperate. They knew they had treated me badly. They wanted to apologize and asked for my help. I sat with that information for a long time. I thought about the night I drove away in the darkness. I thought about the silence that followed 3 years without a single phone call or message from them. I thought about Marcus's words and my parents' nodding heads. Then I told Aunt Linda that I would call them back, but on my own terms. That evening, I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice cracking with emotion. She apologized over and over, saying she had been wrong, that she should have stood up for me, that she regretted everything. My father got on the line too, his voice shaking in a way I had never heard before. They explained the situation, the debt, the foreclosure, the fear of losing everything. When they finished, I spoke calmly and clearly. I told them I had thought about this for 3 years. I told them I would not pay off Marcus's debt because that was the consequence of his choices and their decision to enable him. But I said I would help them find a new place to live if they lost the house. I would give them enough to get back on their feet, nothing more. I had one condition. They could never ask me to help Marcus financially again. And I would decide how much contact we had going forward. They would have to respect my boundaries, or we would have no relationship at all. There was a long pause. Then they agreed. Before I hung up, I said one last thing. I told them I forgave them, but I would not forget, and I would never let this happen again. I ended the call and set my phone down on the table. Priya sat beside me and held my hand without saying a word. In that moment, I realized something important. I had won. Not through revenge or anger, but by refusing to lose myself in the process. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel bitter. I just felt at peace, like I had finally set down a weight I had been carrying my entire life. The first months after I walked out of my parents' house were brutal. I carried so much anger inside me, a fire that burned in my chest whenever I thought about what they had done. I lay awake at night replaying that scene over and over, wondering what I could have said differently, wondering if there was some version of events where I was enough for them. Therapy helped me understand something crucial. None of this was my fault. I could not control how other people chose to treat me. I could only control how I responded. I learned to forgive myself for giving so much without setting boundaries. I learned that love should never be something you have to beg for. It should be freely given, not earned through endless sacrifice. I built a new family over those 3 years. Not by blood, but by choice. Kyle, who gave me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go. Amanda, who listened to me vent over lunch breaks and never judged. Bernard, who reminded me that wisdom comes with age and that some wounds take time to heal. Priya, who showed me what it meant to be loved unconditionally. These people became my home. After the phone call with my parents, I kept my word. When they lost the house, I helped them secure a small rental apartment in a quiet neighborhood. I did not give them more than necessary. I set clear limits on our communication. I called once a month, kept the conversation short, and declined all invitations to visit for holidays. It was not cruelty, it was self-preservation. Marcus resurfaced, eventually sending me occasional messages asking for money. I never responded. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. My parents never mentioned him during our calls anymore. They had learned, perhaps too late, that there were consequences to their choices. The biggest lesson I took from all of this is simple but hard to accept. Family does not automatically mean love. Sharing blood does not entitle anyone to your loyalty or sacrifice. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. I also learned that forgiveness is not about letting people off the hook. It is about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. I forgave my parents because holding on to anger would only poison my own life. But forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not mean pretending everything was fine. It meant accepting what happened and choosing to move forward on my own terms. Today, when I look at those 12 missed calls on my phone, I no longer feel panic or obligation. I feel something I never had before. Freedom. The freedom to choose when to respond, how much to give, and how close to let people get. That freedom did not come from anyone else. I gave it to myself. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to know something. Your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice for others. You deserve to be loved without conditions. And sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you were born into. So here is my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. Thank you for being here and for listening. I hope you find the peace and freedom you deserve. Take care of yourselves.